How you guys feel? Is this amazing? I'm just going to sit right here, and Scott, if you want to come up and join me, I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself.
I sure can.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So why don't you tell us who you are?
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time today. I'm Scott Lewis. I'm a co-founder for Spartan Investment Group. We do real estate syndications and development, specifically focusing on larger residential, not multifamily, but multiple residential single-family homes. And then we've just made a strategic decision in October to pivot to self-storage and start developing in that realm.
All right. So we got a little chance to, this is the first time we've actually met, but we had a phone conversation, and something that I found really interesting was you and I have similar backgrounds. We were both in the military for a while. You still are, I think.
I am.
And so I know, being in the military, how much you could learn from working with a giant organization like the U.S. military. So what did you learn serving this great country that has helped you in business?
Yeah, so no, it's been a truly kind of life-changing experience, as one would expect. I was actually a corporate guy, and then 2006, I woke up one morning and decided that I was going to quit my job and sell everything I owned and join the military. And I did that because at that time I was trying to make a decision whether I would go to business school and get my MBA, or I would go get leadership experience, and the military was something I had wanted to do. So I chose to do the military because of that leadership experience, and I'm an infantry officer as my core branch. So through that, I've had a really good chance to learn strategic decision-making, leadership, and these are all things that are vitally important to build a lasting company.
Okay, well, let's elaborate on that a little bit. Leadership. So tell me, what specifically did you learn in the military that has helped you in business?
Yeah, so I think there's three pillars really to building a lasting business, and that's people, systems, and then ultimately your product. So the people part, if you can't lead people, you can't build a business, period. And one of the big things that is a relatively big misnomer out there is that soldiers are going to do exactly what you tell them to do. That's not the case. There's specified and implied tasks, right? I can tell somebody to pick up a rock and move it. But the implied task would not be to leave it in the middle of the road so that when the general is driving down it, he can't get around the rock that you told that soldier to move. So just because you have that, what's positional leadership, does not mean that the people who work for you, even in an incredibly structured organization like the military, are going to do what you need them to do. So I think one of the things that I learned was that using influential and servant leadership kind of techniques and philosophies to get people to do what you want them to do is far more effective than the positional where you just tell them what you want them to do.
So for someone who has not been in the military and doesn't have that luxury of learning that, and from your experience in business, is there somewhere we can go to learn those types of skills?
Absolutely. There's, and I want to say that they're headquartered here, but the leadership development, I think it's the Center for Creative Leadership, CCL, is an organization that's, I believe, headquartered here in Denver. And they have all kinds of different resources. And I think really there's a lot of self-study that can go into leadership, is to understand the various methodologies in which there are and the various philosophies of leadership there are out there. One of the other things I encourage everybody to do is take a personality test. There's two types out there that are very well known, Myers-Briggs and then the DISC assessment. There's some other ones that are lesser known, but those are the two major ones. And the reason I recommended that, when I was a company commander, I had 6 lieutenants that reported to me. I gave each one of them a DISC assessment because I wanted to see what their natural tendencies were, whether they were hard driving, whether they were analytical, whether they were more reserved and introverted. I want to know who I had working for me so that when I was building teams or when I was assigning things to do, I did not assign one of my more introverted lieutenants to go into a social event in which, a hail and farewell is a term in the military when people are leaving or coming in the unit. Sending an introverted lieutenant to go meet these people probably isn't going to do very well. So to really understand your team, those are two things that are widely available that anybody can do, plus for you personally so that you understand your own style.
Okay. I definitely want to get into systems and processes, and I'm going to go there now, which is maybe a little bit earlier than we had discussed doing that. But
No, I think that's great.
you've mentioned several times the leadership, and that seems to be a theme here, and that came from the military, of course. But would you consider people in the business maybe one of the most important?
Absolutely. Jim Collins talks about getting the right people on the bus and figuring out a seat for them to sit in. Anybody that's worked with people for more than 15 seconds knows that one toxic person can destroy an incredibly high-performing team. And it's that simple. So when you're going out there, and I will freely admit, we've made this mistake too, that we've had to do something very quickly, and we've got a bad person on the team. I mean, it has lasting effects. And the dollars that you save, or the time that you think you're saving by hiring fast, it's inconsequential to the amount of pain it will to get rid of that person on the end, or the detriment that it will have to your team. So that's why I say people, systems, product. Because if you have the wrong people and the wrong systems, it does not matter what product you have. I believe it was TiVo. TiVo is an amazing product, absolutely amazing product. It works very, very well, but it did not catch on. And it's because they didn't have the right people and the right systems in place to actually get that into the market so that it would hit that tipping point and become a widely used technology. They did not do it right. They focused on the product only, and they thought the product would sell itself. It will not.
Do you agree that having good systems and processes will help you lead people and help you manage it? And we talked a little bit on the phone about how important processes is and systems. Why don't you describe for me what you think a process or a system is and how that's helped you lead people?
So no, that's a great point. So in the E-Myth Revisited, which probably it's the Bible that we all live by, right? One of them. The author talks about on or in the business, right? So a business without systems is a job. It's not a business. And the way that I kind of define a business is that if you can walk away from it and somebody else values it enough to write you a check, that's a business because it creates value without you. If the only way that it creates value is if you're there, then you've just got a really tough job. So when you look at systems are repeatable no matter who is doing them. And when you're looking at people, having those systems in place actually improves efficiency for folks because they know it's exactly expected to them. There's a step-by-step process or a checklist that somebody can follow, and you can get repeatable results. Anybody can get lucky once. But when you start getting lucky over and over again, that's not luck. That's just preparation that met opportunity, and the systems were in place so that you could repeat that success over and over and over again. And then eventually you make enough money. Like Joe wants to be a billionaire so he can go buy his own island. So that's kind of the line in the sand is like when you start to get a B in it, that means your systems are really perfected.
The session right before this one, you guys did a fantastic job. You guys also mentioned checklists and processes. It's very similar. Give me a very specific, if you can, example of a process that you've implemented that have helped you grow. What was it? What'd you do? How does it help you?
So it's not a process that helps. It's not a process that's helped us grow. It's a process that's helped us not go bankrupt. So one of the ones that we just put in place as we're moving into a new asset class was our due diligence checklist. So we have due diligence checklists for depending on what type of asset we're moving into. And those checklists make sure that we have touched on every single piece of it during the process. And like I'm a military man, my business partner Ryan is a pilot, so we live our lives by checklists. And having those and having the due diligence checklists ensure that there's not a single step missed. So I don't know if anybody out there that has missed a step in the due diligence phase, whether it's multifamily, whether it's a car wash, whether it's a new dog you're buying. It doesn't matter. If you miss a step in that due diligence checklist, it's bad news for a long time.
A dog?
So sometimes the military causes excess in things. I just throw that out there. It's not a perfect system. But yeah, we use checklists for everything. And my wife will tell you that I'm fanatical about them to the point where she's like, let's go. We're done. Your shoes are tied. We're out of here. So
So clearly you've had a ton of success and you've got a thriving company here. For someone who's just getting going and they want to hire that first person, for me it was my personal assistant. Changed my world.
Yep.
How do you make that first hire? When do you know that it's time to do that, and how do you go about doing that?
So one of the things that we've done is we've set certain triggers that, hey, when we meet this point, and I'm being vague because that's very specific to you as a person and to you as a growing business, to set those triggers or those gates that when you meet them, that's the right time to do it. One of the things that we constantly do is evaluate everything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And if you're in this room, you're not a $10 an hour person. So when you start looking at all these tasks you're doing, assign a value to them. And those ones, and assign a value to what your time is, somehow. And it's different for everybody. And those tasks that are beneath your time, when they start eating into the work that can hit that high dollar, that's when it's time to start looking at people. And generally, you want to get rid of this is our philosophy, get rid of the lowest paying tasks first, because generally those have the smallest impacts, because your first hire probably isn't going to go very well. It's just not. It really won't. Whether it's a 1099 contractor, an architect, or a virtual assistant in the Philippines, it's probably not going to go very well. So to get that out and get some experience, you're just going to have to go through it, and there's growing pains when you do that. I will say that it is incredibly important before you hire that person to have a clear vision of what he or she is going to do and have it written down, and then have that initial counseling session with that person, along with, I recommend personality tests for everybody so that you understand who's coming in to your organization and to make sure that their personality fits the role. Paper is great. I mean, you can stack a resume relatively easy, but that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't hold any water. It's actually like that, the interviewing, the personality testing to ensure that person fits, and then having that position description clearly articulated to that person so that he or she knows exactly what's expected of them, and then set performance targets for them so that you can clearly assess what they're doing.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about valuing your time. Once you can actually put a value on your time, it makes delegating it much easier, right? So you're saying higher paying tasks, you should perform those. Lower paying tasks, you delegate.
Absolutely.
So what would you consider a high paying task, do you think?
I would say negotiation. So nobody has your best interest in heart like you. Nobody. So if you're going to be negotiating a deal, or if you're doing a syndication, building that deal structure, whatever that looks like, if it's debt, if it's equity, whatever, if there's preferred, if there's not, if you're using a partnership structure, if you're using an LLC structure, and I'm not going to go too much into that because there's a session tomorrow about syndication. But that's the type of work that you need to be doing, because the penalties for failure are incredibly high. If you get that wrong, then you can be dealing with a lot of pain for a long time. The tasks such as scheduling, managing travel, even doing some of the minor kind of research work, if you're doing market research to keep yourself fresh, having somebody, Scott Myers referenced the various crowdsourcing sessions up here. Somebody can be scrubbing those and doing research tasks that as an independent task don't add up to a whole bunch. But if you get multiple people that are doing independent tasks, they can become very efficient at those, which means you'll actually get more for your money if it's repeatable. And then you are the person bringing it together.
So negotiations is what you said.
That would be one that I would never sub that out to anybody else.
So that could be considered maybe sales, negotiating, kind of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with sales, you definitely can sub that out if you get the right people on the team and you get the right incentives in place. Incentives are an incredibly tricky thing. My recommendation is when you're putting incentives together for somebody else, get some help. I think there's a book, Carrot and the Stick, by Adam Gostick, which is actually a pretty good read for developing incentives and learning human behavior with incentives. And I don't remember the study, but it's in India, in which they were targeting incentives, and they used India because of they could set up a 6-month pay incentive for like $12 or something like that. And what they actually found is they set up 3 test groups. They set up like a 1-week pay test group, they set up a 3-week pay test group, and they set up a 5-month test group. And if you get it wrong, that 5-month test group failed more than anybody else because they were so focused on that massive payday that they couldn't perform the basic tasks of like getting a ball in a little hole on a game. Where it was in the middle, that 2-week pay gave enough incentive for somebody to care, but not so much that they couldn't focus.
So I think about the highest paying skills, and I would actually lean more on the marketing side.
Absolutely.
I think if you have enough leads, you could screw your sales up completely because there's enough leads coming in, and you just get better and better. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think with marketing, there's a lot of facets of marketing. You have the social media aspect, you have direct marketing, print marketing, verbal marketing. There's a lot of different areas. So to become a subject matter expert in all areas of marketing is actually very, very difficult. So I would say that instead of you doing the marketing, hiring experts and controlling that process very much so, that could be a way to leverage somebody else with a little bit higher task, but ultimately you have the decision authority because you are your brand. And if a bad piece of marketing goes out, you can never pull that back. You can't get it back off of YouTube. If a direct mailer goes out and it looks like garbage and there's misspellings in it, that's a representation of you. So ultimately keep control of that. Now you can definitely leverage folks to help build content on a website. You can definitely help folks build an AdWords campaign or funnel marketing campaign or direct mail campaign or whatever, or a commercial. But ultimately that decision lies with you.
Yeah, and tracking it and making sure you know where your monies are going and what kind of leads are coming in and all of that.
Just as a side note, if you can't track your marketing, don't do it because you'll never actually know if it's effective and you're just wasting money. So with that, develop measures of performance around your marketing campaign before you start. So that way when you're sending out letters, you understand that the verbiage for this particular letter makes sense or this AdWord campaign makes sense. Otherwise, you'll never understand it, so you can't adjust or pivot your marketing, and you'll just be spending money on something you can't measure.
Yeah, you want to put your money to where it's working.
Absolutely.
So speaking of money, I'm a money guy.
Outstanding.
Money is pretty important, wouldn't you say? In fact, so important that you could have revenue and go out of business if the cash flow isn't there.
That's right.
And I know you've had some success raising some money, and I want to dig into that a little bit. I know that's another session later on, but I want to hear what you think about that. So you raised some private equity. You've had some success with that. What made you go that direction instead of just going to a bank and getting a loan?
So we don't do any debt financing on the initial raises. And the reason that we went with other investors is shared risk, shared return. So we like the model. We do every single one of our deals as a single asset LLC, and the investors are members of that particular LLC. So they share in the ups, they share in the down. When we do our pro formas and our analysis, one, we could care less about revenue. Revenue is absolutely irrelevant. It's EBITDA. It's the amount of money that comes in after you pay everything that matters. Zero EBITDA means zero growth. Zero growth means you're going to die eventually. Your company will die if you can't grow. So we never look at top line revenue. We only look at bottom line profit or EBITDA. And when we do syndications and we bring in investors, we like them to share in the risk and reward. So when we do our analysis, we have a most likely, a worst case, and a best case scenario. The worst case scenario is a 20% decline in market. So we could take a 20% hit and at least pay our investors back. The best case scenario is a 15% bump over our most likely scenario that's based on actual comps that are out there. So we are ultra conservative. As a military guy, we always prepare for war, but never actually want to have to go. So I'm very risk averse in that sense. And with the investors, we base their return on the most likely scenario. So if the most likely scenario means they're going to get a 14% return on their money, they could end up with an 8% return on their money if we hit the worst case scenario. Or they could end up with zero. Or we've had one case where we're going to hit, it's a condo project now, we think we're going to actually do above the best case scenario, and they're going to end up with a 47% return. So either way, we have an abundance mindset. Some people have criticized us for giving away the farm. That's fine. We're not an old company. We've only been at this for 2 years. And we have access to probably, $15 million that we could raise in 2 years. But it's because we've been giving away the farm. Like, okay, I'll give away a little portion of the farm because that person that's gonna tend that field is gonna give some crops back because we scratch their backs. So that was kind of, that's why we did that, is we brought them into the deal so they felt ownership with it. And we actually take them on site a lot of times. We'll take them on, we'll let them go to the site, we'll let them meet with contractors and whatever, and we're pretty open with that way.
You're just transparent and communicate with them, and
Yep.
they start telling their friends. And
to answer your question, one of the main reasons we don't do debt financing, especially upfront during the permitting phase, because the permitting phase, we do a lot of development. So the permitting phase for anything is the Wild West. We do a lot of development in DC. I don't know if anybody's from here in DC, but I mean, it's literally the Wild West in that permit office. So it's almost impossible to predict how long it's going to take. So with an equity investor, there's no payments, they get paid out at the end. So we never have to worry about cash flow or the lifeblood of your company, because we have equity positions, not debt. So there's never a check that we're writing every month. Now, at some point during the project, we do bring debt financing on for the constructions, because we get 5.25% on our construction loans, and that's really good. So we do bring on debt at that point, but that's after the project's permitted, and usually even after the development phase, so that we're into the construction phase, so wood's actually going up when we bring on debt.
Okay. And so raising private money, I'm assuming that you've had systems around that and bringing it in. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, sure. So we go through the same system every single time we go for a raise. The first thing that we do is we do a very, very in-depth feasibility study. And my business partner actually calls me the sledgehammer, because every single deal that comes in, I do everything I can to kill it. Because if I can kill it, we could have some downside. And we have a saying, patient capital, protected downside. So I try to kill every deal that comes in. If I can't kill it, then we go into the pro forma and really, really dig deep into the feasibility. My wife works for us, and she's got some past experience in the intelligence community. So we brought that skill set into the business, and she's our director of business intelligence. So some of the stuff that she can do with data is I don't know what it is. It just produces this beautiful thing that tells me what I need to do. So our decisions are always informed by data. They're never informed by hunches. So once that feasibility study comes in, then we look at it, and then we start to, based on the numbers, if they meet our criteria, which are is a minimum return of 30% ROI leveraged. So we have really high ROIs, and everybody tells us we can't do it. I'm like, okay, that's sweet, we just did another one. So once we build that feasibility package, then we start moving into the offering package, and we do the same thing every time. And I won't steal the gentleman's thunder for the Form D resources, but there's actually a lot of resources that go into doing a syndication and registering with the securities that if you don't do it right, you can be in pretty hot water. So we do the exact same thing by building the offering memorandum, the PPM, the subscriber agreement, all the way down through every piece of paper that we have. And we do it the same time, the same way, the same time in the process every single time, so it's repeatable, so we don't forget. And we have a checklist for it, of course.
Systems.
So
we're supposed to be talking about building a lasting company here. What does that mean to you? What does building a lasting company mean to you?
That it can survive you. So if your company can survive you, we had a saying in the military that if you were the leader of an organization, a platoon, a company, a battalion, and that battalion fell apart 90 days after you left, you were a terrible leader. You did not do your job. I had a brigade commander that came down and said, and this is advice that I've always listened. He goes, I don't care what you do. I'm not assessing you at all. He was my senior rater. I'm looking at what the men and women in your company do. He was an MP company commander at the time. What are they doing? He's like, I'm going to purposely stuff you away in a meeting that you can't get out of, and then I'm going to go watch your company get ready to go down the road. And if I go down there and they're all jacked up, guess what? You're going to have a bad day. If I go in there and the motor pool is running smooth and people are getting their stuff ready and they're loading vehicles and that commander's doing his job. So I think when you're building a lasting company, being able to step back and then come back 2 weeks later, if there's 700 emails in your inbox after a 2-week vacation, you may not have the systems in place that you need, that if you stepped away from that company, that it would still run without you.
That's great.
So I know
kind of feel a little guilty up here.
I really believe that the leaders should set the strategic vision to the company, but should enable and push down those decisions as low as possible. It's actually far more empowering to push those decisions lower It takes a far stronger leader to push decisions to subordinates within their company than it does to just keep everything to you. Because if you are making all of the decisions, eventually it will go bad.
So we're about running out of time here. I definitely want to take some audience questions, but I want to ask you one final one. If you can give me 3 pieces of advice on building a lasting company, what would that advice be?
So 3 pieces of advice. Start with education. Take some time, but set it finite. When we made our strategic pivot into self-storage, we made the decision, and it's actually one of our strategic objectives in our plan, to take 90 days and do nothing. In the military, we call it take a knee. Take a knee and learn as much as you can for whatever time frame that you're comfortable with. It's not 4 years either. It's some sort of time frame. We chose 90 days that we were going to do everything we could to learn as much as we could in 90 days for this new asset class, and then we were going to start no matter what. We have a saying, the 100% solution 2 weeks late is not as good as the 70% solution on time. So one of the other panelists referenced getting started. Get started, but take some time and do some basic education first. Then surround yourself with the best people you can. Get some advisors in, and get some advisors that don't have any skin in the game, that have some experience, that are not necessarily, if you're building a real estate company, it may behoove you to get somebody in with tech experience. We're setting up a mastermind here in Denver right now, and we're looking for folks that are non-real estate based, because right now we have 4 people in it, and they're all real estate. There's a lot of other companies out there. Slack. It's a collaboration tool. Went from 0 to $1 billion valuation in 18 months. Having that guy on your team may be a good idea. Even though he has nothing to do with real estate, he built a $1 billion company in 18 months. I don't care, I'll listen to him. So get those people around you. And then the third thing is do an outline of what you think your business is going to do. We developed our outline of our operating model very early on. And of course it's going to change. But that outline allows you to kind of focus on what you're building as you're going along. Because you're going to have to build the airplane while you fly it. And my partner just fainted. He's a pilot. But you're going to have no choice at first. But if you're building it with the end in mind, you can be cognizant of what you need to put together along the way.
That's awesome. Did you guys get anything out of this? All right. Good job.
Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe two questions or so, maybe 3. Does anyone have one? Yeah, if you could just stand up and scream it out, or I don't know, were you guys going to run a mic? That'd be great.
Okay, this question can be for either one of you. Kevin, I know you do. Scott, it sounds like you already have Reg D funds in place. When you started your initial raise for your first fund, what percentage of your raise would you say came from investors that you already knew when you set the fund up? Versus
100%.
100%.
100%.
Kevin?
Oh, it's not anywhere close to that, but I did build the relationship before I brought the money in. See, I set up blind pools, so I don't have investments in mind when I set up the pool, and then I'll start bringing money in.
Is that different for you, Scott? Were you a blind pool, or were you identified asset?
We're not. We're identified asset, and we're actually setting up a specified pool right now for a single asset class. The asset itself may not be in play, but where we're looking as far as the asset class is. So it's not quite a blind pool, but it's not a single asset raise either.
Your parameters are determined, you just
Yes.
don't have the specific property.
The asset class is.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. We got one all the way back here.
I apologize if I missed it earlier. Why the pivot to self-storage?
Great question. So as Scott Myers talked about, he has the lowest resting heart rate of anybody in this room. And the reason that is my wife and I have some rentals, and I hate them all because I hate people. So
We just talked about people for a half hour.
well, no, I hate people that are renting from me. So we were in residential flips because that's a classic starting place for folks, and we generated a lot of organic capital with that. And kind of a deal came along that we had 1 week to raise $1 million. And we did it in a day and a half. And we're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, we can raise money. So it had been 2 years into our strategic plan. So we did a strategic planning session in which I forced everybody in my company go through what's called the military decision-making process. It's an 8-step process that allows you to make structured decisions the same way every single time. And I took them through that, and we had decided that we wanted to go bigger because we wanted to get out of the red ocean market of single-family flips. Anybody that's out there right now knows it's a bloodbath. Anywhere you go, it's a bloodbath. Now, of course, there's deal flow, sure. But we wanted to get away and move to the little bit higher level. So we looked at, we had listened to Joe's podcast for a long time. And my business partner, Ryan, was 100% for multifamily. 100%. That was the direction we were going. I was self-storage. My cousin has built over 1 million square feet of self-storage. And I actually got into self-storage investing in 1999 when he left me on a job site to help to help build this site for a day. It was a self-storage. I didn't know it at the time. But anyway, so we looked at two different asset classes, and we did a SWOT analysis for the 2 different asset classes. And we settled on self-storage for the same reason that Scott had said it, because there's no tenants, there's no toilets. The thing that I didn't like was your tenants would steal from you. And we had some experience of that in DC, which is the tenant mecca. Like, they could not pay you for a year and it wouldn't matter. Chicago's the same way. I had a tenant not pay us for 6 months, and luckily I had some safeguards in place, but we wanted to get away from that. So that's how we chose the asset class of self-storage, because it still has multiple revenue streams on a single site, but there's none of the issues with the tenants.
And I'm getting the red light here, so I think that's it.
The ejection button's gonna happen in about 3 seconds.
I think we're supposed to get up now.
I think so.
All right, thank you. Thank you, guys.